If you haven't seen my most recent video talking about bug miss, which is generally what I'm going to be calling this thing, one, just to remind people that it's a bug, and not only is it one bug, this thing is actually 5 bugs deep at this point. I'm going to go ahead and explain all of them during the mechanics section just so you understand how we're building this the way that we're building. But if you didn't know, you can do this on Blood Mist and be permanently in Blood Mist and permanently resetting it, which allows you to attack monsters at incredibly high rates. And if you were to scale enough lucky hit chance, you're able to proc things like Andariels and Doombringers at incredibly high rates. And as long as I hold down left click, I will never not be in Blood Mist. Go ahead and cue to the footage of the tier 7. Now, what's very different about this build than the one you might have seen in my last video is that we've basically completely swapped over to a separate damage scaler in the form of Andariels' Visage. We went ahead and did this for 2 reasons. One, this happened. Nice. No, ho, ho, big. Let's go, baby! Easy game. Easiest game on the planet. And 2, actually got reached out to by a very cool creator by the name of 3P Venom Games. They are a Brazilian player. They're a Brazilian content creator. I'll go ahead and just link over to them in general. Having mentioned me in one of their videos, where like, hey, Mac finally found out about this bug. So this is something that they had also found during the PTR, like Chronix had found during the PTR, and we had reported on at that point. And they've actually been actively piloting the build the entire time. And while I wasn't able to fully suss out exactly what type of build they were playing, because sadly, just like Kendrick Lamar, I got language barriers, and Google Translate can only carry me so far. But to that point, it was very clearly a damage over time build, and the numbers that they were getting were fairly respectable, somewhere around the 400 million to 500 million tick damage rate, which puts you up around 800 million to a billion DPS, and they're even able to accomplish this on single targets. So there must be a reason why they're able to do that, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure it out. But what you're seeing here is a build, I cannot stress this enough, based off of 5 different bugs that will cause you to temper your gear, masterwork crit, and look for stats that almost don't work for any other build. This is not something you should look to primarily build into. Here is my warning right off the top. This is something that if you are bored right now and you got stuff flying around, you should at least experience it. It is a bug. It will get fixed, hopefully. It's something that we had reported before. I've re-reported it most recently, and I just assumed that hey, probably won't see a fix of this until the expansion or a hotfix that deactivates the aspect. So you have been warned. Don't waste the stuff if you don't got it to try out this weird pet build. But the reason why the build is working at the rate that it is, and you're seeing it kill the bosses at the speed that it is because of Andariels' Visage. And the fact that not only is it weirdly bugged, or at least if it isn't bugged, it works differently than damage over time normally does for a Necromancer, so I'll explain that as well. But it also turns out that the Wither, legendary node in our Paragon board, works on all damage over time and not just shadow damage, or at the very least, it works on poison damage over time, which is what Andariel does. We actually do have a way of scaling Andariels' Visage right now, which again is another bug since Wither is only supposed to work with shadow damage over time. Also, the Wither node is not actually capped like it was meant to be this season, so that's a secondary bug that allows us to scale this damage. But what it means is that we're able to activate certain multipliers in our build, like the Blighted aspect to get a generic damage multiplier, use other generic damage multipliers like Great Feast, as well as Creeping Death, put on a ton of attack speed, a ton of lucky hit chance, and what you end up with is a build that can successfully trigger Andariels at high enough rates. But now that I've shown you the build on a tier 7, obviously it could also do tier 8. I think right now with the gear that I have, it's not cut out for that. My gear is absolutely trash for this build. I have 3 GAs that matter. I haven't even fully masterwork crit everything, and the majority of my rolls are pretty subpar, but this thing has a pretty decent ceiling of additional growth. So let's go ahead and look at the major changes, which is going to be the gear. Because everything else just kind of plays off of that in simple ways. I'll always have a planner linked down below. You can go ahead and check that out if you just want to look at that while I'm explaining stuff. But I want to talk about first the mechanics of the 5 bugs, because I think that this will help to explain everything else. And it's something that I'm getting a lot of questions on while I'm piloting it, as well as in my comments, because Well, it's not very intuitive. Starting off with Creeping Mist. If you put Creeping Mist onto your build, either on your boots or on an amulet, you are able to permanently recast it. The way that this works seemingly only works on the keyboard and mouse setup. If somebody can find a way to get this to work on a controller, I think that would just be generally cool so that more people can play it, like on console. I personally have not found a way. Right now, as I'm moving around and holding down left click, nothing happens. When I hold shift, it will then begin using Reap. The same happens for Blood Mist. Holding down left click and then hitting shift. You'll see that Blood Mist starts going on cooldown. Hitting shift again will recast it. As long as you never let go of left, you can just continuously re-click shift. Holding down shift has some additional benefits, which is that we have such fast attack speed that Blood Mist's attacks actually run out. So at the attack speed that we're doing, basically at this point in the duration, Blood Mist is no longer doing its drain attacks that it does on targets. Doing the drain attacks is incredibly important because that's what we're using to trigger lucky hit chance at incredibly high rates. So while you're standing still, you basically want to be holding down shift and left click the entire time. And then you'll notice me in the gameplay kind of stutter stepping around. That's to be able to get closer and closer to other monsters because there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on with Andariels' Visage. Andariels' Visage says lucky hit chance to be able to apply a poison nova. The nova deals damage in an area and applies its poison damage to everybody within that area. So the more monsters around you all triggering this simultaneously is a massive increase to its overall damage output. The next two bugs both revolve around the Wither legendary node. This is only supposed to make it so that your shadow damage over time effects have a 5% chance to technically crit. Basically, it's a chance for it to do a bonus of damage. It's supposed to be capped at 25% and 130% damage. It is not capped. It won't show you in game, and it works for Andariels. Why does it work for Andariels? I don't know, but it does. So this has a chance to multiply the damage that you do per tick by the bonus that you get. So at double this effect, I basically have, how much more do I have here? I have about a 50% chance of increasing my damage by somewhere around 230%. So a 3.3 multiplier at about 50% of the time, a very large additional damage multiplier in Wither. And that's how people have been getting such good outcomes from Andariels on the Necromancer when it just shouldn't work that way. And then the last bug, the last mechanical bug that you need to understand about the build is a way to get the largest total damage bonus out of it. And it is the fact that you can snapshot Creeping Mist. So right now, you'll notice that I have an amulet with Creeping Mist on it for whatever reason, favorited in my inventory, and my amulet does not have it. Creeping Mist is not found on any of the rest of my gear. By putting on the amulet and activating Blood Mist, you can then swap your amulet again and then instigate the continuous recasting of Blood Mist. So you can also snapshot it. What that basically means is that you get to get the bonus of either running Explosive Mist if you weren't previously, or running a damage multiplier in your amulet that you weren't previously able to. So obviously this is like a huge overall damage increase because being able to cast Explosive Mist allows us to consume corpses for Embalmer for better uptime on Blood Begets Blood. It also allows us to cast Blighted Corpse Explosion, which adds like a little bit of damage, but is mostly there to activate the Blighted aspect. So we get a huge damage multiplier that's generic that works for Andariels. So there you go. That's actually 7 bugs for this build to function. And that's why at any moment it might go away. I can't stress it enough. Only try this if you legit have like $1 billion gold to burn on just completely rolling hyper specific gear just for this build. And how do we actually build it to maximize its damage output? Well, there are a few key features, and we're going to start with the gear and the aspects as opposed to the skill tree, because the skill tree and Paragon Board are actually much less important at this point. Obviously, you're going to need to start with an Andariels' Visage. This is going to be the thing that we're going to proc with lucky hit chance from Blood Mist. Andariels' Visage cannot proc X-Falls. Only skills can proc lucky hit chance. I just want to cut that question off at the pass. We wouldn't want to use X-Falls anyways, because we're doing dot damage, not instant damage, but like people are going to ask, I just wanted to talk about it. Obviously, the attack speed is the most important stat on here. Secondary stat would be the all stats. Intelligence is really important for the Wither node, and the attack speed makes it so that Blood Mist does all of its damage instances that much faster. And we're actually even going to use things like Wrath Mist Chosen to further boost its attack speed. It's really, really important to get as much attack speed as possible. For the chest piece, maximum intelligence. And then as a secondary bonus, you could do Corpse Explosion. Again, we're adding its damage to the kit. It's doing like 5 to 10 million damage. It's not a lot, but like it's free. Like you can do it. We want to have as many lucky hit chances to apply as many different types of crowd controls as possible. So stun, mobilize, freeze, etc. Blood Mist duration as a temper very slightly increases the amount of time that you have in between letting go of shift and left click and being able to click things like in the Infernal Hordes to be able to select which like boon or bane you want. And you can continue to do Blood Mist after that, even after interacting with stuff. If you are doing the snapshotting, never dropping out of Blood Mist becomes very important. If you're not snapshotting, kind of doesn't matter. But other than that, we want to have Cursed Aura. Cursed Aura will automatically apply our Decrepify, and then it will automatically trigger things like Control Glyph in the Paragon board, Amplify Damage in our passive tree. Cursed Aura is super goated here. Fists of Fate. You don't care about the damage roll of Fist of Fate. It very slightly modifies corpse explosion damage, but that doesn't matter. The attack speed and the lucky hit chance are the most important rolls. Like you saw earlier, I got crazy, insane lucky with not only just Sirach having a GA Fist of Fate, but then triple Masterwork critting this thing. So Sirach, I'm sorry, buddy. These are mine forever. I appreciate your donation. Obviously, the most important stat after that would actually be the lucky hit chance to be able to apply a crowd control. For the pants, just the intelligence, no other stats matter on here. Again, lucky hit chance to be able to do something, then we're putting Embalmer. Yes, you generate a blood orb with transfusion, the rate of which is not high enough to maintain it, especially on a single target. And I found that putting Embalmer on my pants is a way of massively increasing uptime on Blood Begets Blood. Now that I know that you can kind of move around while doing this, you can probably pick up more blood orbs more quickly. If you wanted to, you could throw in Tibalt's Will for a 20% damage multi, since we have Unstoppable the whole time. For the boots, movement speed and intelligence, nothing else really matters. You can get corpse skill ranks down here, which would, again, slightly increase the damage out of corpse explosion. And here's where we're putting Explosive Mist to eat the corpses, to generate the blood orbs, and to cast the Blighted Corpse Explosion to maintain a huge amount of our overall multipliers. For the amulet, you would want generic damage multipliers. So your first thought might be Gloom because we're doing Corpse Explosion, when in reality we want Amplified Damage, we want Fueled by Death, and then Death's Embrace. All of these are generic multipliers that would work with Andariels Visage. Other than that, a GA max intelligence roll would be super clutch, and then either attack speed or lucky hit chance. Putting on movement speed while you're in Blood Mist would be the best temper here. And then I got blood overpower damage. That's not what you're going for. You're going for damage while fortified. It is the strongest niche additive damage that we can get that works for all of our damage types, as well as we maintain 100% fortify since we never get hit and we are permanently in Blood Mist. So that's actually the best additive that we can get on our gear here. Here's where we're putting Blighted. Blighted had roughly a 60 to 70% uptime even against a single target, meaning that the total multiplier of Blighted on your amulet is more than 2/3, so more than a 50% damage multiplier, which is the biggest total bonus that we could put here. For the rings, intelligence, attack speed, and lucky hit chance. You want damage while fortified. The second temper doesn't matter. I just have random ones because you need that to masterwork. Here's where we're putting Creeping Death. Now, Creeping Death on a two-handed weapon for clearing out the hordes is very, very good because you apply a ton of different CCs to monsters. But I found in all of my testing that while, yes, that gets me the biggest damage bonuses against elites before I stagger them, the damage only applies to bosses when they're staggered. So not having a 90% damage multiplier on my weapon for the whole fight against bosses versus what this would be, which would be an 80% damage multiplier, just didn't make up the difference there. Yes, you would do better in the hordes. You would do strictly worse against the bosses. And I think that that's ultimately where you spend the most of your time fighting stuff. Then this is where we're going to be putting Wrathmist Chosen, gaining the additional 50% attack speed in cap 2. Vastly improves the ability to output damage instances from Blood Mist, vastly improving your proc rate of Andariels. There's also just like not a better damage multi to put here for people who are like, I don't care about that, I just want to see the biggest number. You could do Inner Calm, but it's just not worth losing out on the number of procs that you get from this ring. Two-hander, we want to be using an axe because it has the implicit damage over time. On the axe itself, you want intelligence, damage, and damage over time. You don't care about maximum life or anything like that. For the axe, again, you would want damage while fortified. I happen to have damage to close on it. And then lucky hit chance to be able to do an elemental surge shadow damage proc. Is it going to be a huge amount of damage? No. Is it going to slightly increase your damage output? Yes. It also will, like, technically speaking, slightly help with blighted uptime since it is an instance of shadow damage being triggered. Here's where you put Great Feast, a big 1.9 multi. Very quickly for the Book of the Dead, we are sacrificing Reapers because we technically do shadow damage and nothing else here really matters. Cold Mages for the vulnerable sacrifice, and then Golem for the attack speed. We're not doing crit, we don't care about maximum life. The attack speed here, again, makes Blood Mist attack faster so that we proc things more quickly. I'm not going to go super in depth into the skill tree because one, I've already done it, and two, it's already there in the planner. The big changes here are that obviously we're still maxing out Hued Flesh, only need the 1 point in Blood Mist. We don't care about its cooldown. You want to generate corpses, maxing out Corpse Explosion with Blighted Corpse Explosion, using Fueled by Death, using Decrepify. You'll notice that we're very specifically using Horrid Decrepify. We don't care about cooldown reduction through Abhorrent, so shout out to Garm, I think, who brought this up to my attention. But Horrid Decrepify says that once a monster gets down to 10% life and it's not a boss, you kill it. Pretty good. We are still using Iron Maiden, and Iron Maiden does slightly more damage. It's not anything really important, but like it kind of adds on there. The points into Death's Embrace, I had an extra point for Death's Approach. Here, we want to max out Transfusion, max out Drain Vitality because we want to get fortified as quickly as possible. I'm not really worrying about like doing minor blood damage here. Maxing out the Shadow skill tree because we do have Blighted Corpse Explosion up. You only need 1 point in standalone, maxing out Memento Mori, and then we're going with Shadow Blight. The Paragon, again, will be down in the planner, but for people who just want to hear me kind of walk through it and talk about it, we're going to go Amplify in the starter board so that the moment that things are cursed, they automatically get this damage bonus. Building up into Wither, we're just doing a minimum investment into Abyssal. We're going to pad through the damage to shadow damage over time affected enemies and damage to elites, since that works with Andariels. You don't really care about anything else over here, and we want to pick up Wither. While we're pathing through, we always want to normally be doing this, but you want to be maximizing how many intelligence nodes you walk through, just to very slightly increase that Wither damage. Building over into Blood Begets Blood, picking up the big multi here, picking up some additive damage when you pick up Blood Orbs and damage while healthy. This is where we're going to be putting control. Building up into Cult Leader. Cult Leader as a willpower build board through is its most efficient. This is where we're putting Dominate. Blood Mist is going to be overpowering at least once per time that you click it. And it's not that you have to do big damage with Overpower, you just have to have overpowered enemies in general to get a 12% damage multi here. Don't sleep on this and don't think it's not working, it does, and it's super good. Building over into Flesh Eater, here's where we're going to be putting Sacrificial, building into the Legendary node, and then all the way up here into Hulking Monstrosity is where we're going to be activating Scourge. Here's the funny part about the footage. I haven't leveled up my Scourge yet. I don't know why. I have to go level it up, but the points that I'm going to show you would activate it if this thing actually had the maximum range on it. So that would be another 1.1 multi that we would have another 10% damage that I just wasn't showing you. Building over into Bone Graft is where I'm putting Gravekeeper, since we're always surrounded by a maximum amount of corpses, huge multi there. And then we're going to finish off our boards by building over into Scent of Death and having Exploit. The thing about Scent of Death is that you would start the combat with a 15% damage multiplier, and then you will be permanently surrounded by corpses. And normally that's sick because you get damage reduction, but we're permanently invulnerable to damage. We don't care about the damage reduction. You never get the multi from here. It's not worth picking up the node. So now that we've built this thing over into a damage over time proc version of the build, how do I feel about it? Well, if it was actually a thing that were to stick around, I would spend like a decent amount of time really, like, one, working on the stats of it, working on my gear for it. I do have carpal tunnel, so playing it on mouse and keyboard has finally gotten to me after 2 days of doing it continuously. I'm going to spend a little bit more time trying to find a way to do it on controller, just so that console folk can try it out if they're interested in it. But the build's fairly decent, like 700 plus Aether runs in, I think it was like 14 or 15 minutes. It only has like a 2 to 3 minute long boss fight. Puts this thing solidly in B tier. So if there's an iteration of this that exists after all of this, or just some way of doing Andariels Necromancer, this could be a fairly solid build, even without the meme of it. Like, yes, you'd have to build in survivability. Yes, you'd have to care about your resistances and armor and maximum life and all of that. But realistically, the majority of your gear already has to have those types of stats on it. So there's a universe where this does eventually transition into something else if Wither gets changed to actually work normally like it should and gets uncapped, etc. But at least for like right now in the current meta, what a B tier build, which is like a lot more than I thought you were going to be able to say about it. Now, I was working on the crit version of this build, which is definitely much weaker than this. But after Masterwork critting on the Fists of Fate, I put Doombringer onto that build, and the damage output from it with that and Rackanauts, you drop Tyraels. Tyraels was kind of a meme. Was getting actually like fairly significantly high. not as good as this, but more into like the 2 to 3 million DPS range, as opposed to like the 1 million DPS top end that I initially quoted for it. So not as good, but not that bad either. So if that was something you were more interested in, you could definitely go with that as well. Doombringer procs are doing fairly significant damage, and you're able to scale it very easily since it's a shadow damage proc. I do think that there's a lot to be said about this build, and I'm just going to wax poetic now. So if you're done with the build guide, you can stop watching here. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And do whatever. Do the stuff you normally do. Leave comments, etc. But talking about the build and kind of what it means for the game, this is very reminiscent of the Flame Shield Sorceress a season ago, where the difference between Blood Mist for the Necromancer and Flame Shield for the Sorceress was that the Sorceress was immune to damage for the exact same rate, but was also able to teleport across 3 screens, do all of their damage attacks. They had no restrictions on skills that they could activate, and they just had to click Flame Shield again. The Necromancer, to become similarly permanently immune to damage, had to be in Blood Mist, where you can't activate skills. The best thing that you could hope for is Ring of Sacrilegious Soul and Explosive Mist. And while we used to use that for things like doing Blighted Corpse Explosion, they nerfed all of those into the ground. This build only being B tier when a legendary passive that nearly doubles or triples its damage works for it that shouldn't. Able to snapshot just to have the ability, not even to gain bonus stats, just to have the ability without having to sabotage the stats on your gear and the damage output of it. And permanently being immune and abusing these types of things, and still only being at this power level, I think really shines a light on a lot of those problems I brought up in my video when I was discussing the video essay from Goblin Inc. from Ruse Cruise of the state of the Necromancer. We almost never get bugs that make us do quintillions of damage. Shoutouts to the rogues out there. We almost never get bugs that make us just level 30 times because we hit a statue. Again, shoutouts to the rogues there. We don't get those bugs like Bulwark Druid back when the game released that was just like unkillable, unstoppable, and just hit the entire screen. This many bugs coming together makes the Necromancer a B tier build, and most people won't play it because it's incredibly boring. It's just holding down a single button and isn't visually interesting or compelling to play. Is it cool to be unkillable? Sure it is. Does it also just like not perform as well as Blood Surge, which is similarly unkillable while doing all of its damage skills? No. Is it similarly outputting the boss kill speed as something like Bone Spirit? Absolutely not. And I know I'm now beating a dead horse and I'm banging a drum that probably doesn't need to be heard because we have the expansion right around the corner. We have the campfire chat for the PTR tomorrow, depending on where you see this video. And I'm just hoping that the noise made by the Necromancer community gets heard and we get some stuff, because we're not in a great spot. And if permanently invulnerable and able to actually output damage and actually do tier 7 hordes at a very reasonable rate is like not enticing enough to make people even really want to do this thing other than for the novelty, just think about what that means for the rest of what our builds do when they can actually take damage and need to care about survivability. That's where I'll leave that concept. I just want to keep kind of pushing that out there because I think it's really important. The build's cool. Check out the planner. Don't build into it because it's super buggy. It's going to get fixed. There's no way about it. Don't like spend all of your gold. Don't ruin all your materials. Try it out if you want to, though. Thank you very much for watching. I'll go ahead and plug one more time. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here and you made it all the way to the end and that impassioned speech really resonated with you in some way. Or if not, still just click the button. It's free and it would really help me out. Leave a like on the video, leave some comments, ask questions, concerns, ideas. What have you tried? What have you been looking into? What bugs have you found? I'm always down there. If you'll notice, I answer and read way too many comments. So I will be down there. I will see you. I will hear you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.